Okay, gang, so this is the first of a series of videos that are going to go through this anatomy and physiology of the nervous system PowerPoint. Okay, this video is going to cover the first 8 slides, and it's just a big overview of the nervous system as a whole. The later videos are going to get into more of the neuron structure, and then the most important part is the actual physiology, which is what this whole unit's about, and that's how the neurons actually send the signal. So that's our big plan. So let's jump into it. Okay. So generally, okay, when we start talking about the nervous system, it's going to talk about all the neural tissue in the body. Okay, and neural tissue includes all these pieces: the brain, spinal cord, which are pretty obvious. You guys know that. Okay, 100 billion neurons in the brain, 100 million neurons within the spinal cord, roughly. We also have receptors, okay, which you'll find in the eyes and the ears and the nose and all sorts of the touch receptors in your skin, the Merkel receptors you remember from the integumentary system and so forth. Okay, and then we have all the nerves that go around. Okay, nerves, we're not going to learn in this unit, we're not going to spend much time on these guys, but next unit we're going to learn all about the 12 different pairs of cranial nerves. There's an olfactory for smell, and the vestibulocochlear for hearing and balance, and we'll get to all those. And then there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves that come off the spinal cord. So the way they're named is cranial nerves actually attached to the brain, and the spinal nerves are the ones that come right off the spinal cord. And we'll get to those, but that's really going to be next unit. Okay? So usually the nervous system is divided into 2 parts. We got the central nervous system, which we'll talk about now, usually abbreviated as CNS. We'll talk about the peripheral in just a second. That's usually abbreviated as PNS, peripheral nervous system. Okay, and central nervous system, real simple, brain and spinal cord. Okay, and in terms of functions, we're going to talk about this. Kind of becomes repetitive. The function part here in this little PowerPoint becomes pretty repetitive, guys. But there's 3 big parts. We have a sensory kind of idea where we're going to detect stuff, take it in, and kind of process all of that information. So the processing of all, like when we touch something, that signal gets into the brain and your brain has to interpret it. Okay. We have the motor commands, which your brain and your spinal cord have to actually originate the signals out to your muscles and glands to make them work. Okay. And then all of our thinking, processing, intelligence, memory, all that kind of stuff that takes place within the brain. So that's the job of the central nervous system. Okay. It's really kind of using the information and either processing. That's a really important word. That we're going to talk about. Okay, the peripheral nervous system, on the other hand, okay, the peripheral nervous system is everything outside of the brain and spinal cord. So all of the nerves of the body. That's usually the way people define it, is all the nerves of the body. And really, they're going to do 2 things. They're going to carry information in. Okay, so sensory information goes in. Okay, and the motor commands are going to go out. And that's the way it's going to break down those 2 pieces. With the peripheral nerves, this term nerves is just all the bundles of axons, which will become much more clear in a moment, and they're going to carry all the information in both directions. Okay, so they're going to carry things in both directions, both in and out. Okay, so here are the 3 big functions again, guys. So sensory function. Okay, so we have receptors. Okay, we got receptors, and they're going to gather the info. They're going to detect changes inside and outside the body, like your touch receptors, Merkel receptors, or the receptors in your eye that detect light. Okay, and then we're going to have to change this into electrical signals, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about impulses in this unit, so we'll get to that. But we're going to have to transduce these, whatever it is, whether it be light, pressure, chemical that you smell or taste. It has to be changed into an electrical signal. Okay, and then they're going to send to the central nervous system. So that's going to be in. Okay, so that's information going into the central nervous system. Okay. Integrative function is once that information is in there, our brain has to make sense of it. So all it is electrical signals being sent in. Our brain's got to say, ooh, that smells good, that smells bad, that's too much pressure, it hurts, whatever it is, it's got to make sense of it. So the interpreting information. Okay. And the last one is the motor. Okay, and motor are all of our commands going out. Okay, so the motor function is all the commands going out, and it's going to go out to what we call the effectors. And effectors is a term that generally refers to all the muscles and glands of the bodies. And muscles can be smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, any of our types of muscles. Okay, so that's your general functions. We can detect things, okay, with the sensory function. We can control things, like control your muscles and glands, and we can also think and process and make sense of all of the environment and things around us. All right, throw a little more vocab at you here. So the divisions of the peripheral nervous system. So notice it's the peripheral nervous system. We're talking about nerves. So nerves have two directions. They either carry information in or out. If it is going in, we call it the afferent division. I will usually pronounce it afferent, so it doesn't get confused down here with the efferent division or the efferent. So I'll usually say afferent or afferent and efferent is usually how I'll do it. And it's all about directions, guys. So these are sensory information, and it's going from the peripheral to the central. So this is again going in, and motor, okay, so it's going from the central to the peripheral. So this is stuff going out. So I burn my hand on the stove. It goes in through the afferent division because it's sensory information going into my brain, so my brain can decide what to do about that. And the motor command going back out would be, hey, I want to move my hand off that stove so I don't burn it any further. So that would be a motor command, move my muscles, and that would be the efferent division carrying that signal out. All right, again, there's some repetition here, guys, and I apologize, but just defining receptors for you because we're going to use this a lot. So anything that can detect a change or respond to a certain stimuli, you're going to see all sorts of stuff there, and sometimes it's special cells, sometimes it's just an adapted neuron, but we're going to see lots of examples of receptors, and an effector is any sort of anything that can respond to the signals, and that's going to be our muscles and glands. Okay, that's what it is. Muscles and glands are two versions of the effectors. All right. And then the last bit we want to talk about is the two big divisions here, guys. And this is something we're going to talk about much more with the next unit. But we have two big divisions of the peripheral nervous system. And the first is called the somatic, and somatic controls skeletal muscles. And remember, the difference is skeletal muscles are voluntary muscles, okay, voluntary muscles. But we also have a lot of involuntary thing with the skeletal muscles, like somebody throws something at your face and your eyes, your eyelids are skeletal muscle, but you can still blink as a reflex. Or that example I just gave about burning my hand on the stove. I wouldn't have to think about that and say, ooh, my hand hurts right now, I need to lift it off the stove. My brain can do that for me without me thinking. So we call those reflexes, and we'll get into a lot of details about that with the next unit. But that's the somatic division, skeletal muscle, somatic division, okay? The autonomic nervous system controls all the things that are not under our conscious control. So our smooth muscle, remember that's like our vasoconstriction, vasodilation, and the erector pili muscles, those are not conscious, okay? Digestion, not conscious. And cardiac muscle, which you don't have conscious control over, and our glands, okay? So anytime those things are controlled, it's considered part of the autonomic nervous system. Most people run this as automatic. That's how they remember it. It happens automatically. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to consciously control it. You can't consciously control it, okay? The two big divisions, those you got in psychology will recognize these. You have a sympathetic division, which is the fight or flight side. It's the stimulating effect. This is for emergencies, okay? And the parasympathetic division, which is our normal kind of rest and relax or rest and digest. A lot of people put it that way. So emergencies versus resting. All right. And that's going to wrap things up, guys. That's the introduction, basic overview of the nervous system. We're going to get into a lot of these things we're going to come back to over and over and over the next month when we go through this whole nervous system, but gives you a big overview to get started. All right?